Before we begin, I'd like to give a massive thanks to Ubisoft and Xbox for sponsoring this video and giving me a copy of the game. It's not often a live service game launches smoothly, let alone with this amount of content, or that it all works so well together, which it does here. And it's not just good for a looter shooter, it's a damn good multiplayer game in general. The map is fantastic with rewarding open world mechanics, AI is vastly improved, gunplay is engaging, there's extensive customization, and PvP is pretty tight. The developers decided to take the novel approach of using the games as a service model to expand the game post-launch, instead of fixing a lack of content. Actually, The Division 2 at launch has quite a bit of content, and it doesn't seem like they're pushing monetization at all. You can get any cosmetic in the game's store without spending cash if you so desire. All post-launch content is free, and they released a video detailing what we're getting in year one, so we don't have to take it on faith. Also, the first big content drop is coming April 5th, which isn't too long after the game released. Now, those weren't the features. The list hasn't started yet, I just felt that those were important to mention. It's not often that you get a live service game that's genuinely good, without any caveats. The Division 2 is a good game, it's as simple as that. I've spent over 50 hours in the game across multiple agents, and I'm really enjoying it. For a game like this, loot, AI, and endgame are vital. Of course, that's not all that it needs to be good. It's like an Oreo without the filling, but The Division 2 only gets better the more that you play it, and I think that that's pretty unique, which is why I wanted to share some of The Division 2's best features. And if you like what you see, I recommend clicking the special link in the description below to learn more about The Division 2. It's nice when games are actually enriched by being open world. I haven't been nearly as keen on open world as I used to be. They're often time consuming and can feel like fluff, with developers not really sure how to bring these worlds to life, and filling them with a lot of activities that just aren't very fun. There's exceptions to this, of course, but as someone who's gotten kind of burnt out on open world games over the years, it's always nice to be reminded of what they're like done well. You probably already know the basics, like the fact that this map is a one-to-one recreation of Washington, D.C., accurate down to what sort of shops are in the street corners in real life, and that it has 3 dark zones instead of 1. And while D.C. has more varied environments, which better suit gameplay than New York City did, the unique feature here is the living world system, which simulates survival through NPCs and events. It gives good reasons to explore and tame the open world. I never felt like I had to grind for loot or resources. It felt more natural than that because the game isn't stingy. Just about everywhere you explore, you'll find weapons, crafting materials, and sometimes cosmetic items. And there's marked areas where you can farm resources if you need them quickly, after you kill the looters anyway. Obviously, the more important loot you'll have to work for, but there's a lot of loot nevertheless. For me, The Division 2's story isn't told through its cutscenes as much as its world building. My personal favorite is the found footage you can find.
Should be easy.
What's your fucking problem?
Just leave, man. We don't want any trouble.
Wanna see what I can do?
Guys, maybe we should just
It's incredibly immersive, easy to get lost in, and rich with detail. Civilians patrol for supplies and actually bring the supplies back to settlements. Convoys travel between points. Civilians patrol the city for supplies and actually bring the supplies back to settlements. Convoys physically travel between points. There's a surprising variety of animals and a slew of collectibles that expand the story hidden throughout the map. It's a world that feels pretty alive, and there's always something to do. It's one of the reasons that I don't always fast travel. But getting back to the living world system, settlements actually feel like sanctuaries. You'll see civilians building up water reservoirs or shelters and changing the settlements visually over time as you complete missions and projects. And donating to projects is actually a good idea because you can get weapon attachments or blueprints. So save some of your backpacks and holsters for donating. You can also recruit civilians to garner services in the White House, such as the firing range or clans. The biggest component of the living world system, in my opinion, are control points. There's a lot more to these than you might think. To capture an enemy control point, you first attack and neutralize it. And then you defend it from the enemy reinforcements trying to take it back. It's a bit of a duality that works really well in the endgame. You also have to watch your control point officer during the battle. If he dies, you'll have to call in more allies. So that's another layer that you have to watch. Capturing these points gives you XP, crafting materials, and a supply room of loot boxes that refreshes every 24 hours, which is pretty useful. However, there's a lot more to control points than this, as they're connected to a net of world events. Who is in control of the point decides what events are happening in what area. More on that later. Open world events engaged me as much as Dark Zone events, which was not something I expected. Your presence doesn't distract hostiles from their objectives. They place the same focus on the objective as they do on killing you. Let's say there's 3 crates, you gotta capture them, they gotta capture them. You're gonna have to work your ass off to defend yourself while getting the objectives and killing the enemies. I wouldn't mind if there was more of a reward penalty system depending on how many you save. And I think there's a lot they could do with this in the future updates and game modes. The game engine is impressive. Not only does Snowdrop look fantastic, but for such a large, dense open world to have virtually no loading screens outside of the occasional 5-second elevator ride, it's truly a feat in and of itself. And the game runs well, a solid 30 FPS on all consoles, with the Xbox One X running at native 4K. The PC version supports ultra-wide and high hertz, and a myriad of options for tweakers. Something else that's equally impressive are AI and enemies. You can't just Leroy Jenkins these guys. Enemies actually posing a threat forces you to take the world more seriously, and I love that. In short, enemy AI is smarter, deadlier, employing more tactics and gear than before, and the bullet sponge problem is out. It's not a forgiving game. If you lose focus or stop paying attention, you're probably gonna die, especially if you're playing solo. Hell, you can die just trying to walk across the map. Hostile factions not only have unique archetypes, but also unique strategies. The True Sons are more reserved and defensive, the Hyenas highly aggressive and incredibly fond of rushing and flanking, and the Outcasts have suicide bombers. The Division 2 is a cover-based shooter, but cover is tenuous. Adaptability is going to keep you alive far longer with this AI. The improved AI also extends to friendlies, which are actually helpful now. Sometimes civilians will be on a patrol nearby and they'll help you out. That's actually saved my ass a couple times. All these AI improvements mean you'll need different strategies when you're playing solo. Flanking enemies is tougher, but still possible as long as they don't see you. They'll keep shooting where they last saw you. If you're someone that prefers playing solo, you can 100% solo everything. Nothing is locked behind group play, but I recommend playing in a group when you can. And I've found that randoms seem to usually have mics and be pretty friendly. I love that weak points are actually useful beyond killing the enemy it's attached to. Shooting pouches of tear gas or grenades affect anyone close enough, including yourself. Very helpful for groups. Why use many skill when few pouch do trick? I've actually seen a lot of people asking for nerfs, but aside from a couple of balancing tweaks, I really like it where it is. Dying for your mistakes is okay when death rarely feels undeserved. Also, you can see exactly what caused your death, which is great. Something to remember is that playing this game is very different than watching it. While the word Endgame has a certain finality to it, it's really just the beginning of the Division 2. After you finish the campaign and reach level 30, the Black Tusk invade the city, switching the entire map to the endgame. They take over strongholds, besiege your settlements, and repopulate every main mission, significantly raising the difficulty of strongholds, missions, and control points. Plus, one of 3 dark zones will occasionally be occupied by the Black Tusk, turning them into occupied dark zones where friendly fire is on, weapons aren't normalized, enemies are harder, and rewards are higher. There are 4 Black Tusk strongholds at launch, 1 for each world tier, with a 5th coming on April 5th. When you take down a Black Tusk stronghold, you advance 1 world tier. Look at these as milestones of your endgame progress. With each world tier, enemies are tougher and rewards higher. World Tier 4 opens you up to tougher bounty missions. Before you can take down these tougher targets, you'll have to go through sub-targets first, each posing a formidable challenge. I've noticed a lot of things with the endgame aren't simply harder, but also having more layers, which is great. But how does the endgame affect the open world? Well, once you reach the endgame, enemies can retake control points, so you'll need to support them with resources that they'll then use to put more patrols on the streets and reinforce the points. There's more to it though, because each is controlled to a net of world events. Who is in control of the control point decides what events are happening in the area. If you complete a world event connected to a hostile control point, the control point's tier will raise in accordance with the number of the corresponding event. Currently, the maximum tier is 4, but World Tier 5 is coming April 5th. With each tier, difficulty raises exponentially, as does loot. Higher tiers reward blueprints in addition to crafting materials and XP. This is particularly useful as every 24 hours, you can reload your control points. It's a really fun system. It's almost like a living board game. As for the Black Tusk themselves, some of their enemies are tankier than the other factions, but what really makes them more difficult is all the tech that they throw at you. They're technologically advanced and pretty aggressive in using gear to flush you out of cover. Drones hit you from above, and the robot dogs and mobile turrets hit you from the sides. Oh yeah, and they have gunships. There's a fullness to the experience that the Division 1 didn't have. The missions overall are better. In particular, side missions, which have the level of quality of the main missions from the first game. Some of these are pretty long, and they can have pretty interesting subplots and objectives, like stealing the Declaration of Independence. It feels like they're letting themselves have some fun with these. Some are serious, and all of them are grounded in the world, but a few of them kind of feel like 90s action movie plots. Like open world activities, side missions are usually a dumping ground for filler in video games. It's rare that I put side missions around the same level as main missions, but in the Division 2, it's hard not to. When I asked the developers about the core foundations of the Division 2, they said it was built with Endgame first. Looking at the Year 1 post-launch plan, they weren't kidding. The first update on April 5th adds a new Black Tusk stronghold, raising the world tier cap to Tier 5. In addition to expanding the story and map and adding missions, they're adding new PvP and PvE modes along with 3 new specializations in Year 1. One of those missions takes you to the Pentagon.
As agents will have to storm the Pentagon and unveil the secrets that hide beneath one of America's most iconic locations.
All of this is free, and that's just the content that they told us about. Their post-launch game is strong. I can't stress how important this is for a live service game. Even at launch, there's a lot of content. They managed to pack a hell of a lot in here without any of it seeming like an afterthought. It feels like there was an equal amount of care and polish put towards open world mechanics, mission structure, endgame, loot, open world PvP, and competitive PvP. Like Conflict, 4v4 match-made PvP with 2 game modes on launch, Deathmatch and King of the Hill. Unlike the first Division, these maps were made specifically for Conflict and showcase areas of DC not in the open world. Unlike the open world, these maps aren't one-to-one creations of DC, but inspired by its areas, so as not to interfere with balancing. I was surprised by how much I like this game mode. I won't get into the minutiae of balancing because that's definitely going to change, but Conflict is fun, and it grants you plenty of rewards as well. You can earn up to 3 caches per match, which makes Conflict more than viable as a source of loot. If you're a fan of this game, you're in luck because you can go pretty deep with it. Between bounties, PvP, and open world events, you've got daily challenges, weekly challenges, clans, clan challenges. You can set goals against your friends for rewards. Stat tweaking, gear tuning, skill strategies. And then you've got secret Illuminati shit where you do jumping jacks in a pool so you can hunt people for masks and who knows what other kind of weird stuff there is. Even if you're one of those people that streams their favorite TV show endlessly as background noise to distract you from your scary inner thoughts, this game commands your full attention. I am perfectly content taking my time. I don't want to rush my way through the Division 2. I've played the endgame before, and I'm excited to get there again. But I'm enjoying stopping and smelling the roses first. If the game is this good on launch, I'm excited to see what they can do with it post-launch. In a word, skill-based. PvP is normalized, meaning all players are on a level playing field, even if one player is level 1 and another is level 30. But again, they do have hardcore areas without normalization where stats are king. There's also normalization in PvE, so if your friend just bought the game but you're at level cap, you can still play together. Mechanically, many things are different from the first game, and you can really see how they're leaning into player choice here. With the Division 2 being more skill-based than stat-based, something that keeps getting new loot interesting is an expanded emphasis on weapons and gear having talents and bonuses that change how you play. This is something that gives you an edge in more interesting ways than higher stats could. Weapon stats are passive abilities and perks that activate by doing various in-game activities, or carrying a specific brand item, like brand sets, which encourage finding and collecting all the gear of a set for a bonus, which is pretty clever. Gear brands. Instead of needing the full set to unlock the bonus, branded gear gives you an immediate bonus and additional bonuses being unlocked with each piece. Recalibration unlocks as the end game gets closer. This allows you to alter stats or talents in your favorite weapons, and you'll only be able to recalibrate one stat or talent per item, so you'll have to choose wisely. Gunplay is fantastic. They sound great, they look great, they have a great weight and handling to them. Outside of some of the things that will be balanced, I couldn't be more happy with gunplay. There's a great variety and they feel pretty different from one another. I find myself having multiple loadouts just because it's hard to pick two guns. And then there's this awesome firing range where you can test out the stats and handling of anything. It's actually pretty fantastic. If you're a fan of The Division 2, you can really go deep into tweaking and tailoring. Gun attachments are no longer loot-based. Each attachment has a positive and negative effect. You can get these through crafting and settlement projects. Personally, I'm glad not to sift through 100 grips, but I would be curious as to what you guys think of this if you played the first game. Which system do you prefer, and how do you feel about each attachment having a positive and negative effect? Back to player choice, there are 8 skills on launch, with most having 3 to 4 variants apiece for a total of 30 variants. Some of these variants introduce a lot of new strategies on how you use the skills themselves. They also have mod slots that grant gameplay bonuses, and you can customize the cosmetics of each skill. Those are some of the best features of The Division 2. If I missed one of your favorite features, leave a comment down below, but I would be remiss in not mentioning developers are key to a game's success. And Massive's dedication to The Division and bringing the best possible version of it is unmistakable throughout the game. They've done some things that really set it apart, and they have earned the faith of the fans of The Division through how they handled the first game, and especially the launch of the sequel. In summary, this is that rare game that does most things well. The Division 2 has already launched in a great state with lots of content and satisfied players. It's a great foundation for them to continue building on. This is not a game that needs comparison against its genre or other games for its positives to shine. It's simply a good game. Once again, I would like to give a massive thanks to Ubisoft for sponsoring this video and giving me the opportunity to talk with the developers. I hope you found this video helpful or entertaining, and if you did, subscribe for more. And I'll see you next time. Stay frosty, agents.